The faint glow of the twin suns filtered through the window, casting shadows on the walls of Zykor's home. The young alien sat at a table, arms crossed, his gaze distant. "Father," Zykor said, his voice tinged with disbelief, "I still don't understand why humans are treated with such respect. They're weak, their ships are slow, their soldiers hardly trained, they can't even hold their own against true warriors. Why do they get all this praise?" Extar, who had been inspecting his old weapon, paused and looked at his son. "You're missing something, Zykor. It's not just about strength or technology." Zykor scoffed. "They rely on numbers and desperation. If they had real power, they wouldn't need our help." Extar set the weapon down with a quiet click. "Let me tell you a story, Zykor. A story that will show you why the humans are more than they seem." The Zyrix Dominion was a shadow of terror, subjugating weaker systems and annihilating opposition with ruthless precision. When they declared war on the United Galactic Council, the galaxy descended into chaos. The Council, complacent and divided, underestimated the Zyrix until they obliterated Orionis Prime, the Council's strongest system, in a single day. Billions perished and fear rippled across the galaxy. Amid the turmoil, humans, recent and unremarkable members of the Council, were called upon not for their technology or strategy, but for their sheer numbers. Viewed as labourers with outdated ships and crude tactics, humans were ridiculed by the more advanced races. Yet, humanity didn't hesitate. They saw the Zyrix as a threat to all life and threw themselves into the fight with determination and selflessness. Despite the ridicule, they would soon prove that strength isn't just measured by technology or power, but by resilience, sacrifice, and an unyielding will to protect what matters most. As the Zyrix armada neared, all eyes turned to Orionis Prime, a lush, vibrant world known for its sprawling cities and thriving ecosystems. It was a key stronghold for the Council, not only due to its strategic location, but because it housed a significant portion of the Council's military infrastructure. If the Zyrix took Orionis Prime, they would have a direct path to the heart of the Council's defense systems. The fall of Orionis Prime would signify the collapse of the entire front line and potentially the entire war. The Council's best fleets were scrambled to Orionis Prime's defense. These were fleets composed of highly advanced ships, their hulls sleek and designed for speed and firepower. With cutting-edge weapons and shields, they were among the most formidable forces in the galaxy. Yet, despite all their advantages, they were woefully unprepared for what was to come. At the same time, the human fleets, new to the galactic stage, were nowhere near the front lines. Humans had been relegated to minor roles in the Council's defense strategy. Their ships were old, outdated models, retrofitted for logistical and support missions. They had no significant military presence, and their combat technology was decades behind the Council's elite races. The human fleets had been tasked with organizing refugee evacuations, distributing supplies, and maintaining communications, essential but menial tasks that the Council deemed fit for such a young species. Other races in the Council saw this as the appropriate use of humanity's resources. After all, what could these primitive beings possibly contribute against the might of the Zyrix? They were only there for their numbers, to handle the drudgery of war, while the more sophisticated species did the real fighting. But humans, as it turned out, had more to offer than anyone had imagined. When the Zyrix launched their attack on Orionis Prime, the battle unfolded with terrifying speed. The Zyrix fleet used advanced cloaking technology, rendering them nearly invisible to the Council's sensors. They bypassed the orbital defense grid with ease, overwhelming the planetary defenses with biomechanical constructs that tore through walls, shields, and soldiers with equal ferocity. Within hours, the Council's defensive fleets were all but wiped out. The ships that remained were too disoriented to mount any meaningful defense. On the ground, the Council's forces fell into chaos. Civilian evacuations were poorly coordinated, and panic spread quickly. Desperate families attempted to flee the city, but overloaded ships were shot down before they could break orbit, leaving millions stranded on the surface. The Zyrix drones tore through the city, their mechanical limbs ripping apart buildings and infrastructure as they advanced. The situation grew more dire by the minute. The Council had underestimated the Zyrix, and now their arrogance would cost billions of lives. As the Zyrix moved in to finish the job, one hope remained: the human fleet. As the Zyrix fleet descended upon Orionis Prime, Commander Jane Calloway sat in the command center of the Resolute Dawn, studying the rapidly deteriorating battlefield. The once pristine planet, now under siege, glowed ominously on the tactical display. The planet's defense grid was failing, and the Council's fleets had already been decimated in their attempts to defend the outer perimeter. The Zyrix, with their advanced cloaking and adaptive technologies, seemed unstoppable. Calloway had seen it all before: the politics, the dismissive attitudes toward human contributions. Her fleet was little more than a collection of older ships, many of which had been retrofitted for support roles. In the eyes of the Council, humans were good for logistics and basic operations, tasks seen as beneath the more advanced species in the galaxy. Yet now, that same fleet was humanity's only line of defense against the Zyrix. The Council had issued orders: fall back and assist with evacuation. The priority was to save as many civilians as possible, and that meant the human fleet had to handle logistics, ensuring civilians could escape the doomed planet. But Calloway knew that with the Zyrix tearing through the defenses and no reinforcements arriving, the evacuation would fail if the line wasn't held. Her officers crowded around the command table, eyes grim, knowing the gravity of the situation. There were no illusions left. There was no strategy to win this battle. The only option was to delay the Zyrix long enough for the civilians to escape. Ignoring the protests of some of her senior officers, Calloway made a fateful decision: the fleet would engage. Her voice was steady, but behind her words lay a deep resolve. We may not have the strength or firepower to stop them, but we can slow them down. The Zyrix are predictable. If we can disrupt their supply lines, keep them guessing, we'll buy the civilians time. We're going to hit and run. Small, fast units. No direct confrontations. We make them waste their resources. They'll never expect us to fight back. I won't lie to you, she added, her voice firm. This is a suicide mission. No one is coming back, but if we don't act, billions will perish too. I know the Council has written us off. I know they think we're a joke, but right now, we're the only ones who can do anything. We've trained for moments like this, but I won't ask anyone to follow me unless you're ready to give everything. If anyone wants to turn back, now's your chance. No one will think any less of you. There was a pause in the room as her officers processed the decision, but no one left. They knew that it was a suicide mission. The odds of survival were slim. Calloway was offering no illusions. She had already accepted that they wouldn't all make it out. But humanity's stubbornness and resolve were what had gotten them this far. All right then, Calloway concluded, her voice regaining strength. Let's go save a planet. With that, the fleet launched, and the Resolute Dawn led the charge into the maelstrom of battle. It was a desperate maneuver, a decision born out of necessity rather than hope, but it was one that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The Resolute Dawn and its fleet of retrofitted ships tore into the void, breaking through the clouded atmosphere of Orionis Prime's orbit. The once serene skies now burned with the glow of fire and destruction as the Zyrix fleet closed in on the planet. The Council's defensive fleets were shattered. Now it was humanity's turn to face the wrath of the Zyrix, alone. Commander Jane Calloway stood at the command table, her gaze sharp as she monitored the tactical readouts. Her fleet, composed of aging frigates, cargo ships and auxiliary vessels, was vastly outclassed by the sleek, high-tech vessels of the Zyrix. Yet here they were, humanity's last stand, racing toward the heart of the battle. The Resolute Dawn was at the forefront, its hull weathered by years of service, its guns equipped with crude but effective weaponry. Unlike the Zyrix's hyper-advanced, energy-based weapons, the humans relied on what they had: kinetic projectiles, nuclear warheads, and electronic countermeasures. They may not have had the technological superiority, but they had determination, cunning, and the willingness to sacrifice everything for a planet they barely knew. All ships form up. Calloway's voice rang through the comms, calm yet tinged with an urgency that belied the chaos awaiting them. Engage at maximum speed. Disrupt their formation. We need to buy time. The ships moved as one, the Resolute Dawn leading the charge through the shattered debris of destroyed Council ships, weaving through the wreckage in a series of sharp, unpredictable maneuvers. In the distance, the hulking forms of the Zyrix flagship and its armada loomed ominously. Sleek and silent, they glided forward with unerring precision, their cloaking systems malfunctioning momentarily as they decloaked to strike. "Enemy ships emerging from stealth," shouted Lieutenant Daniels, the officer at the tactical station. The Zyrix ships shimmered into view like deadly apparitions, their weapon systems primed. They were ready to unleash hell. "Targeting systems are locking on." "We've been waiting for this," Calloway muttered, her fingers gripping the edge of the command table. "Evasive maneuvers now." The human fleet scattered like a flock of birds taking flight from a predator, sharp and jagged, unpredictable. The Zyrix ships opened fire, plasma and pulse beams slicing through the void. The Resolute Dawn juked hard to the right, narrowly avoiding a bolt of energy that disintegrated a nearby frigate. "Prepare countermeasures," Calloway ordered, voice steady as the ship trembled under the impact of near misses. "We're not here to fight them head-on. Keep moving. Make them waste ammo." At that moment, the first wave of Zyrix drones, biomechanical monstrosities, half machine and half living, descended from their motherships. Their purpose was clear: to annihilate the resistance before it could cause any real damage. With grotesque, sinewy limbs, the drones latched onto ships, tearing through hulls and disabling weapon systems. "Engaging drones," shouted Chief Engineer Thompson. "We've got drones on the port side. Brace for impact." The Resolute Dawn groaned as the hull was struck by the first of the Zyrix's biotic projectiles. Systems flickered and alarms blared through the corridors, but the crew held firm. They had no other choice. "Hold steady," Calloway snapped, her eyes flicking to the chaos unfolding on the command display. "We're not stopping for anything. We're going to make them regret this." A series of sharp explosions rocked the vicinity. The result of the first wave of human ships launching their payloads, missiles and warheads that streaked through the black, detonating in the wake of several Zyrix drones. The blast sent a ripple of energy through the battle, temporarily throwing the Zyrix off course. "Enemy fleet reeling," Daniels said, his fingers flying over the console, "their formations breaking apart." "Good. Keep it that way," Calloway ordered, her eyes narrowing as she watched the battle unfold. Her heart was pounding in her chest, adrenaline coursing through her veins, but there was no time to feel fear. She wasn't here for glory. She wasn't here for medals. She was here to do what was necessary, to buy the civilians on the surface just enough time to escape. The Resolute Dawn was forced to make an emergency maneuver as a massive Zyrix destroyer lined up a shot. The ship's stern groaned as it pushed the engine to full throttle, diving into the chaos and narrowly dodging a destructive energy blast that would have obliterated its midsection. Calloway's voice came over the intercom again, low but resolute. "We hold them off for as long as we can. Whatever happens next, we keep the civilians alive. This is the only chance they've got." The human fleet weaved through the vast chaos, slipping between the massive wreckage of council ships, using the debris as cover. At times, they appeared to be running, retreating in the face of overwhelming odds. But there was a strategy in their flight. Every evasive turn, every skirting of the Zyrix Armada's fire, was buying the civilians the moments they needed to get off-world. Around them, the battle raged on. The Zyrix fleet, though powerful and nearly unstoppable, was beginning to show signs of frustration. Their cloaking systems flickered in and out of activation, a result of the repeated electronic jamming from the human fleet. With every pulse, every shot, every near miss, the Zyrix were forced to expend precious resources. And in this kind of warfare, resources were as precious as life itself. "Incoming!" Lieutenant Daniels shouted, but it was too late. A salvo of plasma fire struck one of the human ships, the explosion bright as a supernova. The ship's debris scattered in all directions, and the crew on board was lost. Calloway's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. There was no room for grief, not yet. The battle was far from over. She turned to her crew, their faces grim but determined. They had a mission, and they were going to see it through. The Zyrix were closing in, but so was humanity's resolve. On the surface of Orionis Prime, as the chaos of war consumed the planet, human ground forces stepped in to fill the gaps where others faltered. Despite their outdated equipment and meager resources, they proved invaluable in the evacuation efforts. While the Council forces retreated in disarray, the humans remained steadfast, prioritizing the safety of the civilians. Their leadership was instrumental in calming the panicked crowds, organizing orderly escape routes, and providing much-needed medical assistance. They worked tirelessly to bring order to the chaos, even as the world around them collapsed. As the Zyrix advanced, with their biomechanical drones tearing through buildings and reducing entire city blocks to rubble, the human soldiers held their ground. They improvised where they lacked advanced weaponry, fashioning makeshift barriers out of debris and repurposing old weapons to hold back the enemy's relentless march. Their resilience was the only thing keeping the Zyrix at bay long enough to allow civilians to flee. Amidst this frenzied battle, one act of heroism stood out, a decision that would forever define the courage of humanity in the eyes of the galaxy. Corporal Elias Ward, a medic, refused to leave a group of injured civilians trapped in a collapsing building. As Zyrix drones closed in from all sides, it was clear that time was running out. Ward, accompanied by his team, assessed the situation and came up with a daring plan. They rigged the building with explosives, planning to collapse the structure strategically to block the advancing drones. The civilians, wounded, terrified, were unable to move, but Ward would not leave them to die. Despite the danger of setting off explosives in the middle of an already unstable building, Ward and his team worked quickly, ensuring that the civilians would be as safe as possible. As the Zyrix drew nearer, the group activated the explosives, bringing down a portion of the building, creating a barricade between the drones and the trapped civilians. The Zyrix drones, unable to bypass the wreckage, were temporarily halted. But Ward's team had little time left. They were now trapped as well, but they had bought enough time for the civilians to escape. Ward's final transmission crackled through the comms. His voice was steady, resolute. "Get them out of here. We've got this." The transmission ended, and the connection was lost. Ward and his team gave their lives to ensure that the civilians would have a chance to survive, their sacrifice a testament to the unyielding courage of humanity. Up in orbit, Council generals, who had been watching the battle unfold from the safety of their command ships, were stunned. Such sacrifices were unheard of among their ranks, where self-preservation and tactical superiority had always been paramount. To them, the human resolve was an anomaly, something they could not comprehend. But to the refugees who were saved, and to those who fought beside them, the actions of Corporal Ward and his team would be remembered as the turning point, the moment when humanity's bravery and determination shone brighter than all the galaxy's might. As the battle raged on, the Zyrix shifted their focus to the human fleet, their hive mind identifying it as the key threat to their victory. The other Allied commanders watching from orbit anticipated humanity's retreat. Their ships, far less advanced than the Zyrix biomechanical monstrosities, seemed destined for annihilation. Yet the humans pressed forward, refusing to yield. At the center of the human effort was Commander Calloway aboard her flagship, the Resolute Dawn. For hours, she had directed her battered fleet with precision and resolve, buying time for the evacuation ships to escape the surface of Orionis Prime. But the tide was turning. The Zyrix swarm had begun to adapt, tightening its net around the planet. Leading the assault was a towering Zyrix command vessel, bristling with weapons and teeming with the hive mind's control nodes. Calloway's tactical mind assessed the situation in moments. If the command vessel wasn't neutralized, the evacuation would fail. But the Resolute Dawn, like the rest of her fleet, lacked the firepower to destroy such a massive target. There was only one option. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as the holographic feed displayed the final moments of the battle over Orionis Prime. The human fleet, battered and outnumbered, had done the unthinkable. They stood their ground, charging headlong into the Zyrix swarm to buy time for the evacuation. Councillor Thalor, his crystalline form dimming with unease, leaned forward. "This is suicide," he murmured, his voice heavy with both disdain and disbelief. No species would willingly sacrifice so much. Beside him, Councillor Gizar clicked her mandibles in agitation. "Fools, they're throwing themselves away. For what? Orionis Prime is not even their colony." But as the Resolute Dawn began its final approach toward the Zyrix command vessel, The murmurs across the chamber turned into stunned silence. The translation feed carried Commander Calloway's last, unshaken words. Initiate ramming protocols. All hands to the escape pods. They're abandoning their ship. Councillor Zartek of the Kelith Empire growled, his tentacles quivering. Then he paused, realization dawning as the hologram displayed the escape pods launching. No, not all of them. She's staying aboard. The chamber fell utterly silent as they watched Commander Calloway, alone on the bridge, guide her flagship into the heart of the Zyrix command vessel. The collision unleashed a blinding explosion that severed the hive mind's coordination, throwing the enemy into chaos. The swarm faltered, their attacks turning disorganized, and the evacuation fleet seized the opportunity to escape. As the last of the transports vanished into hyperspace, the feed cut out, leaving the Council in silence. Only a handful of human ships remained, limping away from the battlefield. The human fleet had been all but annihilated. Councillor Thalor finally broke the silence. They sacrificed their fleet, their lives, for people they've never even met. Jizar's mandibles clicked nervously. No species does this. It defies logic. Not logic, Zartek growled, rising to his full height. Honor, courage, a willingness to fight for something greater than themselves. His voice echoed through the chamber, tinged with both admiration and guilt. They're not fools. They're iron hearts. Several council members averted their gazes, unable to meet his. The human fleet's sacrifice laid bare the failure of the council to act. This was not madness, Zartek continued, his voice steady. This was humanity proving their resolve. We called them primitive, weak, yet today they've saved billions, without hesitation, without expectation of reward. And so, my boy, the father began, his voice rich with reverence, the sacrifices of the humans saved over 4 billion lives, a feat no one can match. Commander Calloway and her crew, knowing they would never make it out, gave everything so that others could live. Their courage, their sacrifice, it was a testament to the very heart of humanity. The Resolute Dawn became more than just a ship that day. It became a symbol of what it means to fight for something greater than yourself. The boy, eyes wide with wonder, leaned forward, his small hands clenched in excitement. But did they know? Did the humans know they wouldn't survive? The father nodded, his gaze thoughtful as he looked into the fire. Yes, they knew. Commander Calloway made the call herself. She ordered the ramming maneuver, knowing full well that her ship wouldn't survive the impact. But she also knew that if they didn't stop that Zyrix command vessel, the evacuation would fail. She didn't hesitate, not for a second. And that's why they call humans the Iron Hearts, right? The boy asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if the weight of the term held more power than even the story itself. The father smiled, his expression a mix of pride and sorrow. Exactly. After that day, the Galactic Council, their powerful leaders, saw the humans for what they truly were. The Iron Hearts, unyielding, unwavering, even in the face of certain death, a name given out of both awe and respect. The boy paused, his brow furrowing slightly. What happened to Commander Calloway? Did she survive? The father's eyes darkened for a moment, the sadness in his expression clear. No, my son, she didn't survive. But her legacy, her name, it will live forever. Statues were built in her honor, her story inspiring generations of both humans and aliens alike. She became a legend, a hero that the galaxy would never forget. The boy sat quietly, processing the weight of it all. After a moment, he looked up at his father, his voice filled with curiosity. What happened to the Zyrix after that? Did they ever come back? The father chuckled softly, shaking his head. Ah, that's a story for far later, my son. A story that you're not ready to hear just yet. The boy groaned in playful protest. Oh, come on, I want to know. The father smiled warmly, ruffling his son's hair. Patience, my boy. Some stories are best told in their own time. And trust me, that one, it's a tale worth waiting for. And with that, the father leaned back in his chair, the soft glow of the fire illuminating their faces. The night stretched on, filled with the quiet promise of more stories to come.